You tell strangers things you'd never tell your family. Share with the internet what you hide from your partner. Open up to people you'll never see again while keeping secrets from people who know you best. What if intimacy doesn't create honesty, it destroys it? What if the closer someone gets, the less real you become? What if you're performing for the people who matter most and only being yourself with people who don't? Because honesty requires safety. And somehow, strangers feel safer than the people you love. And that paradox is destroying your closest relationships. Welcome to Unfiltered Adulthood, where we explore the quiet psychological shifts that reshape you in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. If this resonates, subscribe and hit like. There's someone who noticed a pattern. They'd share their real struggles with people they barely knew. The barista. The person on the plane. Random people on the internet. They'd open up completely. Talk about things they were afraid of. Things they were ashamed of. Things they didn't understand about themselves. And it felt good. Honest. Real. But when their partner asked how they were doing, they said fine. When their best friend reached out, they gave surface-level updates. When family called, they performed the version they'd always performed. Happy. Together. Managing. Everything under control. And they started to wonder why. Why could they be vulnerable with strangers but not with the people closest to them? Why did anonymity feel safer than intimacy? Why were they more themselves with people who didn't matter than with people who did? The answer was uncomfortable. Because strangers had no expectations. No history. No investment in who they were supposed to be. Strangers couldn't be disappointed. Couldn't judge against a baseline. Couldn't compare current them to past them. Strangers got the raw version because there were no consequences for being raw. But with the people they loved, there was history. Expectations. An established image to maintain. Their partner knew them as capable. Their friends knew them as stable. Their family knew them as successful. And showing them the mess underneath felt like betraying the person they presented all along. So they kept performing. Kept the mask on. Kept saying they were fine when they weren't. Kept hiding struggles because admitting struggle felt like admitting failure. And the people who loved them had no idea. Because they'd gotten so good at performing that the performance looked effortless. They'd spent years building a version of themselves for the people closest to them. And that version was competent. Together. Handling everything. But that version wasn't real. It was curated. Edited. Designed to avoid disappointing anyone. And maintaining it was exhausting. Meanwhile, they were pouring their actual truth into the void of the internet. Anonymous forums. Reddit threads. Late-night conversations with strangers who'd never know their name. They'd type out everything they couldn't say out loud. The fear. The confusion. The moments they felt like they were falling apart. And strangers would respond. With kindness. With understanding. With their own versions of the same struggle. And it felt ironic. That they could be seen by people who'd never actually see them. That they could be known by people who didn't know them. That vulnerability was possible with strangers but impossible with the people who supposedly knew them best. But the truth was more complicated. The people closest to them didn't actually know them. Not really. They knew the version. The performance. The edited highlights. They knew who they'd been pretending to be. Not who they actually were. Because they'd never been shown that. And the gap kept growing. Between who they were and who their loved ones thought they were. Between what they felt and what they expressed. Between their internal experience and their external presentation. And the wider the gap got, the harder it became to close it. Because now, being honest felt like confession. Like admitting they'd been lying all along. Even though they hadn't been lying. They'd just been protecting. Protecting their loved ones from worry. Protecting themselves from judgment. Protecting the relationship from the messiness of reality. But protection had become prison. They were trapped in a version of themselves they'd created years ago. And the people they loved were in love with that version. Not the real one. And revealing the real one felt too risky. What if it changed everything? What if they were disappointed? What if the real version wasn't lovable? So they kept the stranger honesty and loved one performance separate. Kept bleeding truth to people who didn't matter while staying polished for people who did. And it worked. Sort of. Except it was incredibly lonely. Because being surrounded by people who love a version of you that isn't real is somehow lonelier than being alone. They started to recognize the cost. That their closest relationships were built on incomplete information. That the people who loved them were loving a carefully maintained image. That the intimacy they thought they had was actually distance disguised as closeness. Their partner would say, "I know you so well," and they'd feel a pang. Because their partner didn't. Their partner knew the version they decided to show. The filtered truth. The managed presentation. Not the actual internal experience. And they started to wonder what real intimacy even meant. If it wasn't this. If knowing someone's history wasn't the same as knowing their truth. If proximity didn't equal authenticity. If you could live with someone and still be strangers to who they actually were. They thought about trying to bridge the gap. About being more honest. About showing the mess. But it felt impossible. Because where do you even start? "Hey, I know I've seemed fine for years, but actually I haven't been." That conversation felt harder than just continuing the performance. But the performance was breaking them. The constant monitoring of what was safe to share. The editing of their reality to match the image. The hiding of anything that didn't fit the established version. It was exhausting. And unsustainable. And creating a loneliness that strangers on the internet couldn't fix. They started small. Took tiny risks. Instead of "fine," they said, "honestly, kind of struggling." Instead of "everything's great," they said, "it's been hard lately." And they watched for the response. Braced for disappointment or judgment or the confirmation that honesty was dangerous. But something unexpected happened. The people who loved them didn't pull away. They leaned in. Not with judgment. With recognition. With their own admissions of struggle. With relief that they didn't have to perform either. And they realized that maybe everyone had been performing. That maybe the intimacy paradox wasn't just theirs. That maybe everyone was more honest with strangers because everyone was afraid of being real with the people who mattered. They learned that intimacy doesn't automatically create honesty. It creates stakes. High stakes. Stakes that make honesty feel dangerous. Because when someone matters, their opinion matters. Their disappointment matters. Their potential rejection matters. And that makes truth feel risky. But they also learned that relationships built on performance aren't actually intimate. They're collaborative fiction. Two people maintaining versions of themselves that make the other person comfortable. And that's not connection. It's mutual avoidance dressed up as love. Real intimacy required risk. Required showing the mess. Required trusting that the person would still be there when they saw the unedited version. And that was terrifying. But it was also the only path to being actually known. Instead of just having their performance appreciated. You tell strangers things you'd never tell your family. Share with the internet what you hide from your partner. Open up to people you'll never see again while keeping secrets from people who know you best. But the people who know you best don't actually know you. They know the version you've shown them. The performance you've maintained. The edited truth. Intimacy doesn't create honesty. It creates stakes. And high stakes make honesty feel dangerous. So you save your truth for people who can't hurt you. For strangers who don't matter. For the anonymous void where vulnerability has no consequences. But that paradox is destroying your closest relationships. Because being loved for a performance isn't being loved. It's being appreciated for good acting. And no amount of stranger honesty can fix the loneliness of not being real with the people you actually care about. The risk of being honest with the people you love is that they might not love the real you. But the guarantee of staying performative is that they definitely won't. Because they'll never actually meet you. They'll just keep loving the version. And you'll keep being lonely. Surrounded by people. But unknown.